Hello, and welcome to our 8th annual UAGC Early Childhood Education Conference. I'm Dr. Michelle Ottstott, and I'm excited to introduce you to our presenter today, Crystal Parker. Crystal is going to be presenting parental perceptions of the influence of screen-based media on their 3 to 5-year-olds' literacy skills today. So I'm excited to hear what she has to present to us. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce her and get to know her a little bit. So let me share a little bit about her. Crystal Parker is the founder of Center of Life, which is a nonprofit organization committed to serving families in the community. Crystal recently completed a 4-year qualitative research project delving into parental perceptions of how screen-based media influences the literacy of 3 to 5-year-olds. Crystal is also the mother of 2, and with her family, she finds joy in a variety of activities such as sports and traveling and continuous learning and cooking and exploring anime and indulging in some game time. Her philosophy revolves around ensuring that all children and families have the right to learn, to be loved, and be granted opportunities to succeed. And she shares that her goal is to not judge, but to be the light as she lifts, inspires, guides, heals, teaches, and it is illuminating the community one family at a time. We're excited to have you, Crystal.
Thanks.
Next slide. All right, to get started, we are going to ask you to kindly pull your attention for a brief moment in the spirit of transparency and utmost respect for our community. We have some information we'd like you to read on this disclaimer screen. By taking a few moments to read through the disclaimer, you empower yourself with pertinent information regarding the boundaries of our knowledge sharing environment. And next, we ask you to take a moment to read through this slide as well. And then together, we will embark upon some exciting topics in early childhood education. So Crystal, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I am so happy to be here with you all. Again, my name is Crystal Parker. And like I said, I am so excited to be here with you all today. I'm joining you from the lovely East Coast here in Hampton, Virginia. And a little about me, like she said, I am a mother of a bright young girl who recently graduated. Her name is Desire. She graduated from high school with her associate's degree, the highest honors, and she received a governor's medal. So I'm super duper proud of her. She is now attending Johnson & Wales University. I'm holding tight to my little boy who's 15 and stands at 6'5". So he's my little boy at heart. And he is trying his hardest to graduate early next year because he wants to join the Navy and become a pilot. He loves to fly. We all love to travel, we love to watch anime, and we all enjoy cooking. The kids are digital natives and they do enjoy gaming. So you can only imagine how much of a hard time that I've given them with their game consoles and their screen time use based on this lovely title of my presentation. So again, I'm so excited to share with you all today. The title of my research is The Parental Perceptions of the Influence of Screen-Based Media on the 3 to 5-year-olds' Literacy Skills. But before we dive in, I'm going to provide a quick overview of what we'll be discussing during our time here together. In the overview, we have the problem statement, the purpose of this statement of the purpose statement of the study, the problem to be addressed, conceptual framework, the overview of literature, the conceptual framework, the research questions, the overview or research design, the results, the importance, and the takeaways. So now the purpose statement of the study. This study explored parents' perceptions about how children ages 3 through 5 use screen-based media daily and how they perceived it to influence their literacy skills. But before we start, I'll share a few abbreviations and definitions with you. Screen based media is defined as any electronic screen device, such as a television, a computer, a smartphone, or tablet. Literacy skills was defined as letter sounds and recognition and number recognition. Digital natives, my little people, this is a term coined by Mark Prensky in 2001 for the generations born between 1980 and 1994, and it's characterized by their familiarity and reliance on information and communication technology. The digital immigrant, hello, is a term coined by Vergara Rodriguez et al. In 2022 for the persons born before 1980. I came up with the definitions of screen time after finding a gap in the research where Zhang et al. 2022 stated that many studies explored screen time, but they solely looked at television time, not all of the screens. So for this research study, I wanted to take a look at all the screens that children are exposed to in their day. The focus or source of these questions are based on their parents as their um, their perceptions, the parents' perceptions of the daily screen-based media use of their 3 to 5 year olds, preschool children, just to see why they allow the time they allow, to explore their beliefs that drive them to do what they do, and to see what their beliefs are regarding how the usage of screen time influences their children's literacy skills. The problem to be addressed, this is our next slide. And well, before we jump into this slide, I'd like to provide just a little bit of backstory. So, 4 score and 7 years ago, just kidding, but a while ago in my lovely little life, I served my community as a family services worker. In this position, I provided home visits and worked with families to be sure that children were meeting their age and stage milestones and developing appropriately. But as I conducted these visits, and we would have conversations about screen time and what was appropriate or might not be or what was extensive time, I noticed that for each time I discussed screens, it seems like the families use them more and more. They were excited to use the screens and the apps and discuss how they felt that the screen time made their children smarter. The children could point to these things and they could sweep and swipe and scroll, and they could point to the correct colors. But during testing time, when we gave our tests, the results did not resonate. And so this brings me to the slide, the problem to be addressed. Again, the study's general problem is that preschoolers are allotted an unregulated and an excessive exposure to screen based media. And this can negatively impact their literacy skills, measured by screening tests for behavioral, cognitive, and social development for children ages 3 to 5 years. And this was demonstrated in research conducted by Iyima and Iramak 2021, Ishtak et al. 2021, Clack et al. 2020, and Madigan et al. 2019, just to name a few. Also, we have parents' misunderstanding or disregard of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry screen based media guidelines, which can also result in an allowance of excessive screen time. Additional problems and concerns are that at this age, it is the stage of critical brain development. And during this stage, research notes that children should be engaged with more hands on exploration and more face to face interactions with the caregivers rather than a continuously changing screen, which can cause cognitive overload. And also, when children begin school behind their peers, the learning gap increases and it is harder, much harder for them to catch up. And this directly affects their future, their health, and their quality of life. Our next slide is a brief overview of literature. It looks like a small slide, but I'm going to give you a bunch of information of how, of what I collected over the last 4 years, just to put into this research. So the overview of the literature includes Mark Prensky's 2001 Digital Natives versus the Digital Immigrants. And again, the natives are the generation who were born exposed to screen-based media, while the natives were born right before that lovely dial-up era in 1980. Prensky pointed out that the digital natives thrive on instant gratification and frequent rewards and prefer games to serious work. Right? Okay. He explained how there is also different access to the devices according to their generations. The natives usually have the newest devices and an understanding of this device, where they spend an excessive amount of time. And we define excessive as anything over the amount of time suggested by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Okay, so that excessive amount of time, and research shows that the digital natives have multiple screens in multiple areas of their home, including their pockets. I mean, we have screens in the bathroom and kitchens now. Nowhere is safe. All right. So they have multiple devices in their homes, and the more devices available to the children, the more screen time a child will have. And this leads us to how the morals and familiarity affects their usage. A child learns from their parents and within their microsystem, and this is a part of Grafenbrunner's ecological system. I want to speak really quickly to the familiarity with the children. It research also said that the tablets and phones were the most used by preschoolers. And this was because of their ease of use. So they're more familiar with it. They grab them, they jump on them, and they can punch button or swipe and tap with ease. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly. But back to Bronfenbrenner and the ecological system. The American Association of Pediatrics states that the amount of time, like I said, the parents spend on their screens is a direct reflection of how much time the child will spend on their screen. Prensky also reminded us that motivation is needed for successful learning. And this is where gamification came in. And gamification is just using online apps and games for learning purposes. Using computer games to teach your students, it does motivate the learner, and it can increase their primary education. Now, this is not a bad thing. However, the American Association of Pediatrics does encourage the facilitator to monitor what is on the screen and to talk the learner through the activities. And I'll be talking about this a lot throughout the presentation. This just ensures that the information is interpreted correctly and the activities are completed according to the instructions. Okay, so you're walking and guiding, offering that guidance to the child as they're using their screen. Now, lastly, Prensky and a host of others note that the number one characteristic of digital natives is that they are children growing up in homes that are overly saturated with screen-based media. Like I said, we have screens all throughout our homes, everywhere, on our pockets and our cars. Screens are everywhere. To piggyback on gamification, Mago 2022 explains how screen-based media offers a differentiated approach through learning. Bohr et al. 2021 also explains that educational content enhances preschool language skills. Zanake, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, 2022 also speaks on the benefits of screen-based media and how it's engaging, and it does support skill development. Trott follows up with his explanation in 2022 that excessive screen-based media at age 4 does have a negative association with math and literacy grades by age 8. Trott noted that the easy access of screen-based media to children And he also honed in on how the COVID-19 pandemic further exacerbated this surge in screen based use. And that resulted in increasing screen time. So, we cannot talk about preschoolers and screen based media without mentioning COVID 19. This was a time where, yes, the ease of getting their hands on a screen was there, but families were home and we needed things to keep them busy. Or while we were working from home, everyone had some type of screen. So during this time, like I said, it increased this surge of screen based media use, and that resulted in more screen time, of course. But not only did it increased the screen time, it increased snacking, it increased sedentary behaviors, which are behaviors linked to adverse consequences such as the development of myopia. And that is also known as nearsightedness. And that right there is another fully loaded topic that we will have to discuss another time. Sorman is going to close us up with 2016 information. And they stated that the more hours of screen based media equals poor executive control in preschoolers. All right. And this was done through their focusing on how the more excuse me, screens in the home, the more time the child will spend using the screen based media. And it further resolves that the earlier a child begins using screens, the more hours of time or use they'll accumulate. And again, that's a predictor to poor executive functioning in preschoolers. Okay. And so, one thing that I did notice over and over that was stated in different studies was about the use of televisions and computers and tablets and laptops and other screens in the child's home. Again, how easily accessible they are to the child. And this was also mentioned in another article that some families even keep their television on during resting periods, or they'll use their devices while co-viewing with their children, or just have multiple devices going on simultaneously. This background television, exposure, it is linked to poor executive functioning also. If you think about just sitting, and even if I am trying to guide my child with using their tablet or their screen, and I might be watching something on my phone. We all know that preschoolers, their focus, concentration, it doesn't last long right now anyway. So if I start guiding and stop and I put attention here, well, they'll go from here if I hear an interesting sound on someone else's phone or computer. So now they're focused here. And sometimes the television may be on. So now I've gone from here to here and I'm wondering what's going on the television. So these things are fighting for their attention as the background devices become appealing distractions that grab the child's attention. That's background television, pop-ups, and we'll talk about, we're going to get into that more also as we go through talk today. This was also noted as a limitation. I made sure I noted it as a limitation in my study because some parents did not count the hours of the background noise. That doesn't count. My child isn't watching the TV. It's just background noise. But like I said, that background noise is a distraction and it is fighting for the child's attention. Okay, so I noted that as a limitation in my study because we did ask, well, how many hours do you think your child watches television? And they would give us based on what they thought or what they felt or they saw. So the background noise, like I said, that does count. All right. So, like I said, they might not have counted the hours that their child is asleep with the television in the background. All right. So, moving right along to our conceptual framework. This study was guided by Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory and by Vygotsky's sociocultural theory of development. Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory model, it asks, how does the environment impact the child? And that was Bronfenbrenner's 1979 study. And this study was focused mainly on the microsystem, which is the innermost layer. All right. And the ecological theory model, the child is impacted mostly by the microsystem. And this is because it's the stage where most of the time for the preschooler, it's spent with the family. And this includes the immediate family. All right. So we know as educators, parents are the child's first teacher, and the home is the child's first school. All right. So the parents' use and views of screen based media will directly, and I said that earlier, directly influence the child's use of screen based media. So simply put, if I believe that screen time is okay, then hey, have at it, have your screen time, enjoy yourself. But if my feelings are different, like me, I feel okay. I tell my kids, you have this much time. That's what we're going to get. Up, timers are going off. Let's go. That's all the time we have. So it's really based on your belief system. And that's where the digital natives versus the digital immigrants come in, because the natives, like I said, that this is their communication. This is how they interact. So we had to take into consideration during the study was that these natives are raising the children now. So they are going to spend more time on screens. So I'm going to jump back in here. All right. So, like I said, it depends on the belief system of the parents. Kaya 2020 also reported research findings that stated parent media use, again, significantly, it does predict the child's screen, how much time the child will spend on their screen. So that's just some research, one piece of research to back that up. There was so much more. Again, years 3 to 5 is a critical time of brain development. And this is not a time where the children should be handed a device and sent away to be babysat by the television. Like I said earlier, the parent needs to be guiding them through. For example, if we're watching Dora, when Dora says, "What color is the sky?" and the child yells green, and Dora yells correct, and everyone screams in celebration. Oh, correct, the sky is blue, and everyone screams in celebration. So the child did not have that quick feedback from the parent that says, "Oh no, this is green and this is blue." So it's at this age the child needs that scaffolding, that one-on-one time for learning and for building. And this is where Vygotsky comes in. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory focuses on the more knowledgeable person and how parents create the learning environment and how our little ones learn from observation. Vygotsky's social-cultural theory of development emphasizes the role of social interactions in cognitive development and learning. Here, the child or subject learns from the interactions with that more knowledgeable person. And this theory is aligned with co-viewing and the guidelines that are proposed by the American Academy of Pediatrics, co-viewing suggestions. And they said that this co-viewing does allow for that one-on-one scaffolding time, and it offers that real-time immediate assistance. Vygotsky also stated that learning is a social process. It's a shared activity, and it allows the learner to take a more active stance in their learning. And moving on to our research questions. All right. So, our research questions are: what are parents' perceptions surrounding the time their child, 3 to 5 years of age, spends on screen based media? And number two, what are the parents' perceptions of the content their child, 3 to 5 years, views on the screen based media? And what are the parents' perceptions regarding the potential impact of screen based media on their children's literacy skills and development? In the overview of the research design, excuse me, participants and data collection, um, the study participants had to be parents of children ages 3 to 5. They had to use or must use screen based media to influence literacy skills, and they had to live in Hampton. For recruitment, we used propulsive and snowball sampling, and the data collection was done so through surveys, interviews, and field notes. Thematic analysis was used to uncover and explore themes. We began with a general demographic survey and a survey of questions about screen use to find who qualified for the study. And then I took those questions and we met with the people that did the participants that did meet the qualifications, and we began to probe and pull apart their questions and see why they felt the way they felt, or why they gave their child more time or less time, or why they used the apps or the streaming devices or programming that they did use. All right. So we followed that up with interviews to get more in depth information, during which I kept those field notes and jotted for a better understanding. And I jotted down my questions for bracketing and just for mindfulness purposes. And here's a brief of the results. So in the results overview, there were 3 research questions that guided this study. The questions aligned with Vygotsky and Bronfenbrenner, and 8 themes emerged. From research question 1, it was answered with 2 themes. Research question 2 was answered with 4 themes, and research question 3 was answered with 1 theme. All right, now it's time for the fun stuff. Research question 1. Now, I'm about to explain to you these themes, what we found, what the parents said, and how it all came together. So, research question 1, the focus here was the parent perception of allotted time on the screens. 2 themes were found. It was the use of timers to limit and control the amount of time used, and the high usage on the weekends and low usage on the weekdays. The first theme was supported by 11 participants, and we had 18 total. All right. The findings reveal that the participants explained that they used timers to limit and control the amount of time used on screen-based media, and the content that was watched with their children. Some participants stated that timers were used to limit the screen time, and they used the Family Link, which is a Google sponsored tool. And this allows the parents to adjust the parameters for their children's devices and just to set timers for what they would watch. So some parents explained to me that, oh yeah, the TV goes off at this time. Oh yeah, their computer goes off at this time. So they had timers set for devices to shut down. All right. In the current research, the decisions on timers, they had already been established by the parent so that the child could not exceed a certain amount of hours when watching TV and interacting with apps on screen devices. It is good that parents set these boundaries. As Bronfenbrenner believes in 1995, he said that the child's development occurs through a complex back and forth interaction between actively evolving people, symbols, and objects in the environment. So, although there may be positive feedback about screen time, it's important to also integrate that face to face time for interactions. Many parents' reasons for their timers were that they did not want their child on the screen all day. And that was their quote. Oh, I don't want the children on the screen all day. I don't want them on the screen all day. However, many parents felt that the suggested 2 hours or less was unrealistic. This was suggested by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And this is one of those moments where I found that my definition of excessive and the parents' definition of excessive were completely different. Okay, so that was one really fun part to discover and to listen to the parents. Like I said, their quote was, "Oh, I don't want the child on the computer all day," and then I would say, "Oh, did you understand or did you know that it's suggested for 2 hours or less?" And they're like, "What?" And they do that in the morning, or they can do that in their sleep. And I was just like, so it was really eye opening, and it was really cool for me to have to take a neutral stance, but to gather all this information. So it was awesome though. It's also important to note the difference between passive and active learning. The passive use of screen-based media is sedentary. It offers no feedback from the instructor or the screen, and it causes the child to engage very little with the parent. Children engaging in screen-based media activities independently, it displaces the parent-child interactions necessary for learning and development, and it opens the opportunities for ineffective passive learning. An example for parents to consider is setting a timer on YouTube and celebrating with the transitional activity once the timer sounds. And this is something I actually did in my classroom, and I've made these suggestions before. This is it, you're in your microsystem, so I have an opportunity to teach. All right, I'm on my screen, you're on your screen. Let's set a timer on YouTube. Go to YouTube, we set timers. The timer goes off during that 30-minute period. Confetti goes off. Yay. All right. So now we're going to get up and we're going to be active and we're going to do something different. And even in my classroom, it got to a point where as the kids would ask, oh, can we set off this timer? Or can we use this timer? So they found their favorite timers to set. So it became a thing. And I encourage parents because they're like, okay, we're going to set a timer that's really going to work. If we make it a thing, it really can work. So, and like again, I said, that demonstrates the microsystem at work. We're sitting in here with the family and we're learning, and they're watching us. So they're observing our parent behaviors, and they're learning to set the timers and then move on to a different fun activity. Now, moving on to high usage on the weekends and low on the weekdays, I found here that parents allow extended hours of screen based media content on the weekends rather than weekdays, which seems pretty normal. Um, and it was noted that parents have a structure put into place and they embrace the means of technology to control how the children utilize their screen based media. So the participants talked about how the duration of watching TV, it depended on the day of the week. On the weekends, many participants allowed their children to watch TV or screens as long as they wanted. And a lot of people did mention TV. They can watch TV. They can watch TV. And some people did specify, oh, they can use their tablet. They'll walk around the house with their tablet. So the preference for watching TVs or using their screens on the weekends over the weekdays, it could also be influenced by Vygotsky's concepts of cultural norms and practices that guide behavior. Because it does seem normal through the week. We have our family time, we have our homework, everybody's moving around, we got to be in bed by 8, so there's less screen time. Whereas on the weekends, families have more time. You can stay up later, there's no bedtimes, have at it. All right. So, given also that many parents with traditional work hours have more time on the weekends, they can more actively participate in their children's screen time and activities during these days. Excuse me. When parents are practicing using strategies and technologies to control their screen time for children and to provide breaks during screen time, it also reflects this use of scaffolding, and this requires parents to support and guide their children. Moving on to research question 2. Here, the focus was parental perception of content. So, how do they perceive the content that the children were watching? And from this, 4 themes emerged. This research question 2 gathered the most information. All right. So this is based on the content. What do you feel about the content? How do you feel that this content is helping out? So A, monitoring and limiting content. So, how did you monitor? How did you limit what was being brought in through screen? B, learning and entertainment purposes. What is this content being used for? Is it just learning purposes? Is it entertainment? Is it a little both? C, the increase of attention and coping mechanisms. So this was basically asking, what is the screen, or how is the screen time used? Is it used as a distraction or to hold your child's attention, or for coping, to quiet the child? And then letter and D for educative content. Okay, so a lot of people reported on how this is very educational. So let's start with monitoring and limiting the content. All 18 participants commented on this theme a little over 75 times. All right. And the findings indicated that the parents monitor and limit what content their child watches. And one way that the parents monitored this was to guide them on what they watch, to check the age appropriateness, and also by searching reviews by other parents who left reviews before allowing their children to watch the content. So there we have that guiding, okay? And we're just doing different things to make sure, okay, this is okay, you can watch this, or this isn't okay, we're not going to watch that. Again, the participants explained that they use the family link to monitor what the child watches. So this little family link came in handy. I did learn a whole lot because I don't have little children. So I learned a lot about the family links and all the YouTube characters and all the things. It was quite interesting. So the family link, this notifies the parents when the children are trying to download content they should not download or just download in general. So the children could not download any content without the parents' permission. And in this section, parents made mention of gamification and how the children knew what they were doing and did not need much guidance. So here it is with the ease of use. So you don't need guidance. So go swipe away. All right. And many parents spoke about how the pop ups here would fight for the child's attention. And it was sometimes when the child was able to click and maybe enter a site that was on the pop up, the parents had to work through explaining maybe some inappropriateness or even coddle a frightened child. I did have a couple parents that said, yeah, they had clicked on something and they had, oh, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a YouTube character, and she was like, he had sharp teeth, and he was just a mean character, and the child was scared, and so it showed how when they're not guiding or if they're not monitoring and how the child can click on something that these things can happen. So like I said, they may have to coddle a frightened child. The parents also stated that they found their children on sites that they should not be on due to pop-ups or, like I said, just swiping the devices on their own. But parents can monitor screen-based media during these interactions while boosting their child's confidence and cognitive and social and language development. Vygotsky social cultural theory applied here in these transactions emphasize the importance of the adult guidance when using screen-based media. And moving on to the next one, the learning and entertainment subtheme. A lot of parents did admit to, well, we use it a lot for entertainment. Some said, I think about half of them said that we use it for a 50-50 split, half for entertainment, half for learning. And I did have a couple that says, oh no, it's just for entertainment. It's just for entertainment. Okay. So they discussed how they used YouTube Kids, some parents did, to ensure what their child was watching was based on some type of learning program. And some participants mentioned using their leap pads for learning. And so they were bringing up all these things. I was like, oh, I forgot about the leap pad. All right. And I also learned about Miss Rachel, who is a YouTuber who teaches letters, numbers, and a host of other learning skills. And this influencer was mentioned by several different parents. All right. And she is a parent who started her YouTube her YouTube channel to help her child. So it was a parent, all right. And another YouTube phenomenon was Gracie's Corner. And this young lady is also mentioned by several parents here in the study. Now, one parent specifically mentioned how she enjoyed Gracie's Corner because it got the whole family involved with music and dancing. And this parent explained how this entertainment also as educational time. And from this, I got how some of them said that they did use it for 50-50. Although this was entertainment, they were using an entertaining platform to provide educational services, educational content. So she talked about how it served as educational time and entertainment time, and how the children learned as they mimicked their parents. And I found this amazing as she explained the workings of Bronfenbrenner's microsystem and Vygotsky's focus on learning from the more knowledgeable person. And, she was absolutely, when I asked her about it, she was like, what is that? And what is this? And it's interesting to see how these theorists are at work in our homes, and we may not even be mindful of it. So this shows how screen-based media can fulfill many needs, such as entertainment, education, relaxation, or even distraction. It was also acknowledged that co-viewing um, used when we sit with our child and co-view, and we guide or we use additional questions for dialogue purposes. This creates an enjoyable learning experience and bonding for the children. They're bonding, they're talking to the parents, and they're learning. They're getting more language as they are using their screen. Okay. The findings from this research also supported the claim that screen based media has educational benefits for preschool children. And it was it was just showing how they were used, how screens can be used in different capacities, but how it can have a lot of positive there can be a lot of positive interactions going on with it um, during their screen time. So I'm going to move on to increasing attention and coping mechanism, or using devices as a distraction to hold the child's attention. So here, the findings reveal that parents used phones to distract their children by giving them the screen, or to hold their children's attention, or help soothe the child. So the tablets and the phones and the social media, and that was one that struck me as different. I was like, your child's 5 years old, but they're on social media. So social media isn't just for the older ones. They have little TikToks for little people. I was completely unaware. So they're using different social media platforms as well. And these were all recorded as coping mechanisms that children used as devices to soothe and calm. They had music, and then they had little pop bubbles to calm. So they're like popping bubbles, and that's a calming thing, and or to find a place of peace, as what one of the parents had specifically said when their child becomes overwhelmed. So the parents explained how they use these apps and streaming programs to calm or soothe the child. They also use the phones and tablets to hold their child's attention. And when I say hold their child's attention, either I need you to sit here because I have to go cook, or I have to go clean, or I have to get your room straight, or let me put out your clothes. So one parent explained how she sets her child up at the kitchen table. She gives her some little snacks, and she puts the screen there. She says she knows that'll keep the child's attention, and they go and get done what they have to get done in the house. Another parent stated, as a single parent, you have to do what you have to do to get things done around the home. And when I reviewed the data, I did notice that of the 18 participants, 16 were female and 2 were males. 13 were single. With this information, educational leaders can take into consideration this why. I'm a single parent trying to do all the things alone. How can this information in creating strategies for effective screen-based media be used? I also added this to my future work portion of the dissertation, because it would be interesting to look at the study using only maybe married couples to see if there is any fluctuation in using screen, or if you're needed to hold the child's attention just as much within a two-parent home. During the few during the interviews, a few parents discussed also how they use devices to calm their child. Like I said, they had the bubbles or the music when they became rambunctious, or to soothe the child if they were crying. Some just said if they cry, they just swipe it and they find what they want to watch. And many of these examples support the use of digital devices to pacify the child. So I also wanted to take note in the future, whereas, this babysitting or the pacifying the child, comparing to giving it specifically, for learning. So here we were looking at the content and what the content was used for. So like I said, some did specifically for learning, some specifically for entertainment, and then we added in this piece just to hold their attention or to pacify the child. Last on this research question was the educative content. 17 participants mentioned this. The participants suggested that the screen-based media content children watches that taught them how to read or to pronounce their sounds and their words. During the interviews, parents stated how their children use apps such as ABC Mouse to learn or YouTube videos to watch whole class sessions to teach their child. One parent said that they saw an improvement in the word pronunciations in their child due to the content their children watched. Some parents discussed how the apps and streaming assisted in increasing their child's vocabulary. They taught colors, shapes, and numbers. Some participants discussed how they would just upload books on their child's personal device to encourage reading, which I thought was really mindful. Parents discuss how the songs and jingles assisted in teaching their children numbers, shapes, colors, and words. And this is all great information. And it was great insight into why the parents allow the excessive screen time, because they were looking at it and feeling that, hey, my child is learning. I see my child knows more letters today, or my child makes more sounds. Therefore, this screen time must be providing, them this access to these skills. But looking through research, parents are still cautioned to monitor the time, as the more time the child spends alone on the screens, the less time they are learning through parent child interactions, which include rich language interactions to engage and engaging of the children's senses to learn. Parental involvement is also important, as it provides the opportunities for children to engage in a more active learning environment where they can receive that immediate feedback rather than the sedentary or passive environment where there's no feedback from the instructor or the screen, and they may have little engagement again with the parent. So, moving right along to our question number 3, our research question 3. The focus here was parent perception on screen-based media's influence on the literacy skill. So how does screen-based media influence the child's literacy skills? Within this research question, one theme came to the front, which was increased learning. So my child's learning is increasing, which was mentioned by 15 out of the 18 participants. Here, the parents discussed their perception on how screens influence their children. One parent stated that they did introduce their child to screens earlier than 3 to 5, and they felt that it has been beneficial. Another parent discussed how the children use screens to learn things that they have not learned or they are not learning in their preschool or daycare. So parents discussed how the children were learning their alphabet and reciting the numbers. And I'm going to jump ahead with that comment really quickly, just to offer a few questions for us to think about. Can being exposed to new material occur too early? Are there consequences to learning items before the foundation is laid? Um, can this make learning a skill more difficult and frustrating, causing the child to form the wrong opinion of learning? So, how can we assist parents in understanding how reciting numbers and letters use a different skill set than giving the child the tools to apply how these symbols and these letters and these numbers work? So, because I can recite does not mean that I can appropriately apply. So, how can we educate and teach the parents that and help them understand that all that seems to be learning could just be rote or recital? Okay, so let me jump back on track and we're going to wrap up with why this is important. All right. And I'm just going to run through this slide. So it equips educational leaders from this study. Much information has been gathered to provide insight into the parental perceptions of why they think screens influence literacy skills. And this material offers strategies for balancing screen time and hands on activities. We've heard several times through this talk about how this information can equip educational leaders by giving them insight into parental perceptions and gaining insight of the parents' why. This can also allow the professionals to design strategies that align with the appropriate use and parental expectations. Knowing their why, it allows us to enter the homes with a plan to demonstrate ways to increase parental engagement. We get insight into their world of challenges that they face, both personal, I'm a single mom, I need a break, here, take this tablet and have your moment, and the technological, I'm not sure what else to do, but I thought this was helping. I did have one parent mention, she was like, I'm not sure. I just give them the tablet. It has learning things on it. So I thought they were learning. So here, the educational leaders, we can be the ones who offer these strategies for balancing screen time and hands-on activities. How can we take the screen and bring it to hands-on activities for the children to apply in our little real life situations in the grocery store, out in the car, wherever we are, in the playground maybe. This information equips pediatricians, nurses, and home visitors with essential information for new parents and caregivers. It supplies information and resources for healthcare providers to provide parents and caregivers, and it also supplies tools for knowledge to support the children's development and well being. Here are some takeaways for you to leave with. When reviewing this study, I found out that parents define the words excessive, monitor, screen, and time very differently. So understand parental definition variations. Ask questions to see where their understanding is rather than to assume. The greatest response in the 8 themes developed in this study was monitoring and limiting content. Here, all 18 participants commented, making over 75 references to this particular theme. I went in thinking that parents may be app heavy on their phone, and I thought that immediately of the one child that comes up to you and asks, "Hey, do you have some games on your phone?" But I found out that more parents used YouTube and other streaming services and programming. So it's also important to remember that the although the apps and the streaming shows may be developmentally appropriate, it doesn't mean that they were approved or written by other educational leaders. Question: what qualifies them to create the content or activities to engage your preschooler in learning? Lastly, how can you use, and I ask that question because some parents would do reviews. So we're looking at reviews by parents saying that this is okay, but what is okay for my 3 to 5 year old? Who defines that? All right. Lastly, how can you use this information to offer guidance to parents? And in a quick summary, here we go. I introduced the study, which is based on parents' perception of how screen-based media is perceived to influence their preschoolers' literacy skills. I gave you a literature review and some conceptual framework, which was provided to offer a that guided the research questions. Um, backdrop that guided the research questions. And I then provided some results, and I reviewed the importance and implications of the study. Ladies and gentlemen, that is my time. I hope you get to go home with some new knowledge and some questionable questions. I am Crystal. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Please feel free to reach out with questions, concerns, and collaborations. My information is on the screen. Thanks so much for having me.
Wow, what a great study, and so important for so many different types of professionals working with young children. So thank you for sharing your study with us, Crystal.
Thank you.
As
You're
a
welcome.
as a researcher of educational technology myself, I can truly appreciate the outcomes of your research and having you share that with the other professionals in our field. So again, thank you. And I want to thank our viewers today for coming to our session. And I want to encourage all of our viewers to take the opportunity to view another session today from our
Mhm.
childhood education conference here at UAGC. Again, thank you to Crystal and to all of our viewers.